Good morning, Sydney. My name is Tim. I'm the guy in the hat. Can you guess why? People often say, why is his name Tim? So, ladies and gentlemen, is there anybody here that knows Beat the Reset, just before I get started? There they are, there's a few. Very nice. Good to see you all. I'm a social media influencer, apparently. That's what my children call me. And what I've done is built a small channel that has exploded globally now. It's been going now for 2.5 years. And my channel started because there was a disconnect between what the commodity space was doing and what the consumer was doing. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a very big educational gap between consumer understanding of investment. Who agrees with that? That's a fair statement. I was trying to join the two chords together. So my channel, Beat the Reset, is a research channel. I research global monetary systems. I've had the pleasure of touring with some very, very amazing people, including Lynette Zhang, who was here last year. We were on tour after that together. I don't know who learnt more from who. Her and I spent a lot of time together, and she was equally as amazed at what the Australians are doing, by the way. Deeply humbled by this little country called Australia, who has almost no knowledge of gold at all at the consumer level. I wouldn't say the people here, but definitely, who agrees with that? The man in the street has no understanding in Australia. I went to now I don't know whether my slides are going to match anything that I'm talking about, by the way, but that's pretty typical of my kind of talks. What is the slide looking like? So I was getting my hair cut in a place in regional Victoria. I come from Victoria. Any other Victorians here today, by the way? Very nice. I'll talk a lot slower for the Victorians. So I was in Victoria getting my hair cut, and I had my hair cut by a guy from Turkey. And let me tell you, he blew me away. Here I was in consumer land in regional Victoria, watching mums and dads going in and out of shops and buying their goods. And all of a sudden, this little hairdresser said to me, gold. That's what you need. I don't know why he said that, but he said gold. Who agrees with that? Is that something we need? Now, my other one, of course, is silver. Any silver fans here, by the way? I would hope everybody's a silver fan. Now, I'm the author of 2 books, and I think what's really been the big success for Beat the Reset is a few things. One is I wrote 2 books. My first book was called Things We Were Never Told About Money. And it turns out we weren't told a hell of a lot, as it turns out. We went to school. Who feels like you came out of school knowing all about money? Any hands? Anybody? No, because school wasn't designed to do that. And what we did as consumers is we, of course, went into the workforce. We were told to get married. Remember that one? Get a job. Who had a job? Anybody here ever had a job? I had a job. Didn't last very long at any of them. Had to start getting creative with my resumes and making it up. And as I got older, my resumes gradually looked stupider and stupider to make up for the fact that I had no idea what I was doing. So, and these are the facts. And we're told to go and get a job, get married, and buy what do they tell you to buy? What's the number one asset? A house. Isn't that fantastic? And you do all of these things. And then what you do is you find that by the time you get to something called preservation age, which is an incredible word that the government describes. They use that word to describe people who have reached an age where you are now worthy of now spending all those funds that you put into your superannuation fund, or if you've got anything left, by the way, and your parts still work. At the age of 65, you can claim your superannuation and then spend the last 35 years on the bus with a whole lot of people you don't know looking at monuments. I mean, some people... Is that... And I mean, that is essentially consumerism. That is what you get for being a consumer. And I say that because I was one of those consumers, and at some point, it has to stop. At some point, you have to stop doing the running of the mouse on the wheel. And for everybody in this room, it's going to look a little bit different. However, at Beat the Reset, my research into monetary systems is vast. My historic research came out in my second book called The Great Asset Shift, and my third book is on the way, and I did a talk in Sydney 2 nights ago, and I unveiled my new book for the first time, and my new book's called 2033, and you can probably guess that's 10 years from now. talking about the monetary systems in 2033. Who in this room thinks that the monetary systems might look a little different in 2033? Yeah. I think they're going to look a whole lot different. And I think this is why I talk about the shift from consumerism. Because I personally believe that the three positions that any person needs to survive this monetary reset. Now, there may be people here who are thinking, what monetary reset? I hope you're aware that we are about to transition, just like we did in 1933. We transitioned from essentially a commoditised currency called specie currency, which was produced by the US Treasury, and we transitioned into the US dollar, of course, which is a fiat currency, full fiat currency now. Has the US dollar got any value in it? There's a question for you all. Well, of course, people continue to use it. 60% of US dollars are still traded in reserves of central banks. Central banks have three essential tier one assets, and so surprisingly enough, the US dollar still manages to remain as a tier one asset of the central banking system. But I would say with the rise of BRICS nations, that could be on the cards, which means the consumer has some serious work to do. I don't know if my slides are matching anything I'm talking about here, by the way. This is a new bunch of slides I threw together for this event at about 3 o'clock this morning. So it doesn't look anything like my normal talks. By the way, my normal talks go for 3 hours, are very historic and very futuristic, but today I'm very, very limited in what I can say. However, you can learn a lot more by going to my channel, Beat the Reset. So we are transitioning now from a paper currency to a What sort of media do you think we're transferring to? Would it be unfair to say digital? Is there anybody in this room that is surprised by that? Because we are moving to a digital system because the most powerful of your central banks, the Bank for International Settlements, has decided that this will be the case, together with its 60 or so central banks. They are moving digital, which means our value system is about to change. It means that the poor old Australian dollar, which trades at a parity of 0.6 against the US dollar, has almost no buying power. The Australian dollar has virtually reached zero, and at some point it potentially will. But before we get to that, I think it's blindingly obvious that the consumer needs to diversify. Who believes that? Diversification is the key, and it's your asset class and your choice of assets is completely up to you. However, there are three. I just want to explain to you something very important, that the person that survives this next reset looks like the following to me, based on my research. Number one, zero debt. You need to transition through this reset with zero debt. That means, and people say to me, but hang on, Mr. Guy in the Hat, wait a minute, I've got credit cards, I'm paying off a sports car, I've got a piece of real estate that I've got my mortgage. Are you telling me to sell that thing? Well, I'm not telling you to do anything, actually. I'm just saying that if you want to survive the reset based on what's coming with the new NFT blockchains where all assets are going to be traded in RWAs, now this is the way the world will go. We are moving to a fully liquid system. What is the worst position to hold in a fully liquid system? Fixed asset position. You don't want to have fixed asset positions. You do not want that. Now, this is based on my research, so if anybody out here's got an alternative opinion, that's totally fine. So I'm just talking about my own personal research in my channel. So you will be, so number one, zero debt. Number two, no fixed asset positions. Why, Mr. Guy in the Hat? Because we are moving to a fully liquid system. Everything moving all the time. The two tokens that you'll get used to hearing with monotony in the future, one is called a utility and the other is called a security, and you might want to just do a quick background on those two because they are going to pretty much define how assets will trade, especially real estate titles and property in the future. That is moving to NFT blockchain, and we've already seen the first signs of that in Victoria on the 3rd of August. 2024, that was 4 weeks ago. Who's from Victoria again? Our titles, housing titles, just moved into the digital realm. That doesn't mean that all titles magically became digital because, of course, people are still holding paper titles, but it does mean the next time you trade your paper title, there will be something recorded as an event, and that event will transition your title to digital. Now, once it becomes digital, it has counterparty risk. Counterparty risk is something you need to factor in. So, The three positions you need to hold across this reset. Number one, zero debt. Why zero debt, Mr. Guy in the Hat? Because if you are dealing with an Australian dollar that has collapsed to zero in favour of another system called a digital currency, you do not want to be trying to pay off debt that is remunerated in dollars that have no value. And the Australian dollar will not be at parity with the new digital currency. The Australian dollar will trade at probably 10 to 1 to 100 to 1, just like the United States debased the US dollar in the January of 1934 by 59% against gold. They're going to do the same thing to the Australian dollar. They're going to collapse it into the digital currency. So in order to offset the risk on that, you have to be holding out of system assets. Obviously, my number two favourites are gold, physical gold. I'm a physical gold guy. Physical silver, which I believe is the number one trading asset on the planet, by the way. Long way ahead of gold. Gold is a wonderful reserve asset. But if you want something that can really spice up your life, certainly silver can absolutely do that. Who believes that? Who believes that silver is an incredible trading asset? I personally believe it is the number one trading asset, without a doubt. Why would I say that? In my second book called The Great Asset Shift, historically we never traded gold. Historically we traded silver, and that is the facts. I have found almost no references to trading gold. I've found a lot of reserve, a lot of export, a lot of import, but I haven't found trading. The entire Spanish Empire, which reigned for 400 years, was a silver empire. The American Empire was a silver empire. The American Empire, which had its first Coinage Act in 1792, its first Coinage Act spoke about silver. Silver was trading in the Spanish Empire at 4 to 1 against gold, the Spanish dollar against the gold doubloon at 4 to 1. And in the American Empire in 1792, they switched it to 15 to 1. And in Australia at 2024 on the Commodities Exchange, I think we're trading at about, 90 to 1, 88 to 1. So this asset is incredibly powerful in what it can do. So my point here is the third trading position. So as I said, number one, no debt. Number two, no fixed asset positions, because if you have fixed asset, that goes against the liquid model. So this is counting down. This is telling me how much time I've got left. Is that right? So I've got another 14 minutes. You guys can handle another 14 minutes of this? Really? Okay, I've got a woohoo up the front. Very nice. Thank you very much. I'll have to give you that $10 later, actually. Thanks for doing that. So are you finding this interesting? So the third position you need to hold is a fully diversified position, and I'm going to explain that very quickly. So I'll just go through those again. A zero debt position, because the Australian dollar goes to zero here. It goes to zero. The US dollar is trading at 1 cent of its original purchasing power. On the December 23rd, 1913, the Federal Reserve Act came into play. And that, at exactly the same time, the US dollar was trading at $20.67 an ounce for gold. What is the price of gold in Australia today? We're in a room full of gold, people. So in the US, it would be $2,500. So if you have a look at the price, if you do use your calculator, you will see that the US dollar against gold now trades at 1 cent. Now the Australian dollar is pegged to that at parity of 0.6. So we have nothing left in our dollar. If you don't believe me, go to your local supermarket with a red plastic basket. If you can fill that thing, I want your signature. So we used to have trolleys back in the day when I was a young guy, which was a long time ago. We used to have things called trolleys. No one uses trolleys at the supermarket anymore, not the deep trolleys. No. I'm not saying they don't use trolleys, I'm just saying try and fill one. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Your dollar is almost at zero. So I don't know if anybody has been to a supermarket recently, but from where I come from in Melbourne, you don't agree with that, sir? And no, I'm not saying you can't, but what I'm saying is this dollar is collapsing to the point where the common man, I'm sure people can fill it. We could all probably fill a shopping trolley. That's not the point. The point is that the dollar is failing in a major way. One obvious sign of that is that your commodities are rising. Gold will rise against a failing currency. If you don't hold it, then you have no wealth position. What you have is a debt position. Fiat currency is obviously a debt. That is exactly what it is. It's promissory debt by your central bank. I don't think we're going to get too much argument there. And the point I'm trying to make here is that you need to hold A, zero debt, 2, no fixed asset positions. I had somebody on my channel say to me, why are you one of the few commentators that is talking about zero fixed asset positions? It's because I've researched 10 years into the future of the monetary systems. And if you could see through my eyes, and you will in my book called 2033, you will see why I say what I say. You will not recognise this landscape in 5 years. I can tell you that. Ray Dalio came out at the Asia Summit. I don't know if anybody follows Ray Dalio, but he came out and said the exact same thing. He said diversification reduces risk. Counterparty, having no counterparty, reduces risk. You need to have full liquid positions. That's exactly what he said. Holding fixed assets is highly problematic. You cannot be in a fixed asset position in a market that is fully liquid. That is like throwing down anchor in the middle of a yacht race. That is ridiculous. We are moving to NFT, non-fungible token blockchain. Your entire life will be governed by AI on a blockchain that has a full record of in and outs. That's exactly where this goes. If you don't believe me, have a look at something called Unicoin, produced by the Digital Currency Monetary Authority and fully ratified by the International Monetary Fund, which now sits under the banner of the United Nations, which is 193 countries signed up to a convention. If you don't believe me, we're going to go to a full programmable digital currency. I've just given you the answer. Unicoin, that's something you need to know about. Enbridge, Project Enbridge, fully underpinning the BRICS transition away from which currency? The US dollar. You do not become a member of BRICS if you are not prepared for de-dollarization. Who's heard that term before? That means, de-dollarization means you are transitioning away from the US dollar. Are you aware of that? And when you transition away from the US dollar, you are moving away from something and towards something else. And when you have it fully ratified by Augustin Carstens and his board of the Bank for International Settlements, which has been essentially the globalist superpower since 1929, then you have to sit up and pay very close attention to what's going on. How close are we to achieving a full central bank digital currency? Would you like to know? We have 11 countries around the world who are trialling a central bank digital currency. Every single trial failed. Are you aware of that? 10 of them took place in the Caribbean. One of them was Africa's biggest oil economy, which was Nigeria, and it failed. And it failed because it turns out that people don't trust their governments. People want to hold their assets. Who believes that holding your asset is an important thing to do? It has zero counterparty. That is critical. So the final part of that 3 things you will need to survive a reset is to become fully diversified, not just in monetary commodities, but also in the very, very format that we're moving to. If we're moving to digital, then you need to diversify into digital. Does that make sense? At Beat the Reset, we work with a number of clients all over the world, and our favourite portfolios, I will share them with you, look like the following. So our portfolios are built for the next 10 years. They're a decade-proofing kind of position, if you like. Number 1, 80% commodities. I know this sounds crazy, may sound crazy to a lot of people here, but we are into commodities in a major way. Now, not just commodities, but also fine art and collectibles, numismatics. If there are anybody into numismatics here, by the way? Nobody. 1. Semi-numismatics. I'll take semi-numismatics. Fine art and collectibles, another major, major position. So I just want to say that I believe the strongest position for this reset are, first of all, the 3 things I told you: no debt, no fixed asset positions, and diversification. But within diversification, I believe, personally, based on my research, now this is just my research, and everyone's going to have their own opinion, but this may just share with you where my brain is at and where my audience is. 80% physical commodities, risk-off assets, within either a vault or within your possession. Now, I know a lot of people don't want to hold 6 tonnes of silver under their floorboards, but when currencies transition, it's necessary. The reason you do it is because it's necessary. When a fiat currency goes to zero, and no one in this room has lived through that just yet. And by the way, there are currencies around the world that are suffering right now. The Lebanese pound would be the most recent example. Zimbabwe, I'm sure a lot of people understand what happened to that dollar. They have a $10 trillion piece of paper. Well, 10 trillion times zero is still zero. And we have also Venezuela. We have, of course, major problems around the world with fiat currencies that are falling apart at the seams. And you only have one other currency standing, which is the world reserve currency set up in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference, was the US dollar. And for 26 years, they traded unilaterally around the globe with countries that were happy to do so. But then in 1971, they went off the gold standard. And what a lot of people don't understand is what exactly did that mean for the US dollar? It meant that the US dollar obviously went into sharp decline, held up mainly by confidence, credit, and of course the fact that it somehow has some connection with Saudi Arabia. And of course that gives it the status of, we call it the petrodollar. I mean, people would understand that. However, Saudi Arabia has all the keys right now. So if you would like to know how BRICS plays out and you want to know where that all goes, does anybody not know who BRICS are? Has anybody never heard of the BRICS nations? I hope you all know who they are. The key player in the BRICS group, if anybody would like to know, is Saudi Arabia. And the reason is because somebody came to me a while back and there was this great big hoo-ha, and I even did a video with Kerry Stevenson. And she asked my opinion on what was going on with the petrodollar. Is that the end of the petrodollar? Is Saudi Arabia going to ditch the petrodollar? No. Saudi Arabia cannot do that. Why, Mr. Guy in the Hat? Because the US dollar trades 60% in reserve. That is not a possible position for Saudi Arabia. The euro trades 80% in reserve. The British pound and the yen trade 3% in reserve, and the Chinese yuan trades 3% in reserve. You cannot walk away from the US dollar yet, which is exactly why on the 3rd of January this year, when Saudi Arabia were meant to turn up on the table of the board of the BRICS nations, they didn't turn up. People think that Saudi Arabia is somehow connected with the BRICS nations. I hate to tell you, that is not true. They never took up their position. Would you like to know why? Because they have a deal. And the deal is to sell oil in the most tradable currency on earth. And what is that, Mr. Guy in the Hat? It still happens to be, by default, the US dollar. The very, very unbacked, useless, worthless, 1 cent based US dollar that we continue to talk about. However, here's the play. If you'd like to know how they're going to play this one, here it is. And maybe I'll start to wind up after this. Are you finding this interesting? Yes. This is very fascinating, what I'm about to tell you. Saudi Arabia has its hands tied. It cannot walk away from the US dollar because that would commercially be a very stupid decision. But they don't want the US dollar equally. So how do they play this? Would you like to know what they've done? Well, the Bank for International Settlements came up with a fabulous idea because, of course, Augustin Carstens, the man that looks like he's eaten the entire board of the central bank, he has got a plan. And he understands, as we all do, the US dollar is doomed to fail like it did on March the 6th, 1933. It already collapsed. It lasted 20 years. That's how long the US dollar lasted. And somehow it has hobbled along as the weapon of choice by the United States government to sanction nations. And quite frankly, most of the world has pretty much had enough of that. So here it is. The Bank for International Settlements has developed a brand new digital blockchain known as Project Enbridge. You would know that. Now, it's interesting that the Bank of Thailand, the China Central Bank, United Arab Emirates are involved. We also have Hong Kong. We have the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. They are all involved. Everybody that's involved in Enbridge is a BRICS nation. And guess who else just got involved? Saudi Arabia. Why, Mr. Guy in the Hat? Because while the United States is playing its little games over in the Persian Gulf, because of course Iran will not toe the line, in the meantime, Saudi Arabia has quietly joined Project Enbridge because they are getting ready at some point to transition into a new currency. And of course, Saudi Arabia in that position can continue to trade US dollars and completely appease the United States. And it can get ready, of course, with its secondary option to transition as a BRICS nation, which it is not currently a BRICS nation. And by the way, there are many nations lined up, just so you know, ready to become BRICS nations. And the last time we saw a world reserve currency become a world reserve currency, it took just 44 nations to sign and ratify. Now we're talking probably well north of 100 nations for BRICS. So you can pretty much back it in that this pretty much looks like this is the way we're going to go. By the way, the United Arab Emirates is already trading in a full digital currency at the wholesale level with China. We've seen a few trades happen already. These trades are happening at light speed. It hasn't come to the retail level yet, but there's a whole host of reasons why that hasn't happened yet, primarily because you won't use it just yet. But you will in time, and I haven't got time to talk about that today. I'm watching my counter here. So the need to transition from consumer to investor is critical. And I guess the big one is, what's the difference? I have people come to me all the time and they say, Mr. Guy in the Hat, how do I become an investor? And I say to them, you want to know the answer? You change the way you think. Who believes that? That is the difference between a consumer and investor. Consumers will consume and investors will invest. And that is what you must do. And the reason I do this journey is not for me or for fame, fortune and glory. Just so you all know who I am, I do it for my children and your children. And you should too. So I'm not the most important person in my life. It's actually my children and your children. So we do this to protect them, to give them a world that we could never have had before. For me, it's not about shiny cars, it's not about owning stuff, it's about having positions that are tenable and sustainable. And dynastic positions, positions you can pass on to future generations. That's the positions you need. Now, my final diversification in the other 20% that I didn't mention, of course, was digital assets. You absolutely need to look to the digital asset space, and very quickly, there are only three: cryptocurrencies, stablecoins, and central bank digital currencies. Stablecoin is the midway point, and they are just a holding grid. Central bank digital currencies are fully programmable and not something you'd really want to get involved with, although you will see them in your lifetime and very shortly. And of course, cryptocurrencies are decentralized and of course incredibly important in any diversified portfolio. In my opinion, MX Technologies, central bank, RWAs, which are real world asset technologies, and of course BTC, ETH and some of these other technologies. Well, that's it for me, the guy in the hat. I wanted to thank you all for your time. I hope you've enjoyed this today. I hope you've learned something. Keep being passionate, and as I always say on my channel, what do I say, guys? Make good choices. Thank you very much.